The defendant had a motive to commit the crime, argues the prosecution again and again. The defendant did not have a motive to commit the crime, claims the defense over and over. And both the prosecution and the defense have good reason for their reiteration. Motive is ultimately the foundation of every criminal trial in America. The police detain a suspect on suspicion of motive. The state arraigns a suspect on probability of motive. And the court tries a defendant on legitimacy of motive. Why is all this talk about motive so significant? Because motive is at the heart of any action, good or bad. Because motive leads to action. In the end, the fate of a defendant on trial usually lies in each lawyer's ability to prove or disprove that the individual's motives can be linked to a specific action. If the evidence shows that the individual's motives and the criminal act are an unlikely association, there is little ground to convict. In other words, actions without motives are very unlikely to occur. And the same is true of your actions as a salesperson. In the sales profession, you can't ignore your core motive for selling, then rely solely on hype to sustain your enthusiasm to sell. When you do, your enthusiasm will simply be based on emotional highs and lows and how you feel that day or in that particular moment. And that will make it very difficult to sustain momentum. Trying to sustain your selling energy without tapping into your core motive for selling is like trying to run a marathon on inspiration alone without food or water. No matter how much adrenaline you have as the starting whistle sounds, when your body is depleted of nutrients, no amount of inspiration will give your muscles the energy they need to keep going, and eventually you collapse. Well, as a salesperson, your level of enthusiasm depends heavily on your core motives for selling. And true sustainable enthusiasm in sales begins when you understand these core motives. That's because motive truly gives birth to action. External stimulation, again, books and tapes and CDs and seminars and so forth, is supposed to be a catalyst that taps into your existing motives for the purpose of initiating consistent, motive-centered action. But external stimulation alone is not the true mother of action, and as a result, it will never sustain your enthusiasm in the long term. See, many salespeople make this mistake. Either they don't understand their core selling motives, or they mistake money and materialism for motives, or at least the end result of their action. And those mistakes then lead to this emotional roller coaster of a career while they leave discerning customers with a bad taste in their mouths. Have you ever thought about what might happen if your customers could hear everything you were thinking during a sales transaction? Would they still want to do business with you? Would they put their trust in you? Or would they walk away even sooner perhaps than they already are? If anything would reveal your current motives for selling, whether legitimate or not, letting your customers hear your thoughts surely would. For some salespeople, that would certainly be a good thing. It would show customers that their intentions are honest and mutually beneficial. But for many salespeople, revealing their thoughts would get ugly. It might sound something like this. The salesperson might say, "Can I help you with something?" The customer replies, "No thanks, I'm just looking." The salesperson says, "Well, just so you know, we have a big sale going on right now on several of our new models." "Not really, but I'm telling you that because I want you to think you're getting a better deal than you really are." The customer replies, "Okay, I'll keep that in mind." The salesperson says, "Was there a particular car you were interested in, preferably one of our most expensive models so that I can get a big commission?" The customer says, "Well, I'm thinking about buying my daughter an Altima for her high school graduation gift, but I'm not sure yet." So the salesperson says, "Those are good cars. I used to own one myself before I traded it in for a Maxima. The truth is I never really owned either car, but I'm telling you that so that I'll have more credibility with you when I talk you into spending your money." The customer says, "I think a Maxima may be more than I really want to spend right now." The salesperson says, "Well, let me tell you that once I realized what I was missing, it was a no-brainer to spend a little more money to get that added safety and the features that a Maxima offers. And ironically, now my daughter drives that car and loves it. Actually, I don't have a daughter, but telling you that helps me relate to you better and should help me talk you into buying the more expensive car, which means more money for me." So you get the idea in that little psychological kind of banter going on. I know that it sounds somewhat humorous, but many customers would hear something very similar if the salesperson's motives were audible. And that's sad. In fact, the fundamental source of hyping is that the default motives for many sales professionals are money, status, and job title. The problem is that those are merely rewards for successful selling. They are results of successful selling, but not the roots. And such motives are certainly not enough to keep you consistently motivated. If you've been relying on something similar to keep yourself enthusiastic about selling, if you've been constantly reminding yourself of the potential payoff in order to get you through tough times, if you've been solely looking to pump you up products to get yourself excited about selling without looking at why you sell in the first place, then you're guilty of hyping. And you need to make a change before it's too late, before the sugar high, if you will, wears off and you feel more lethargic about selling than when you actually started. In order to break free from a hyping habit, you must leverage your core motives for selling. We all have one predominant reason for why we sell. You have one motivating factor that dictates much of how, when, where, and why you go about your business of selling. And ideally, that core motive drives you to new heights as a professional. You must look deep inside yourself and answer the question of why. Why, above every other reason, do I want to succeed in sales? And if your answer is something that can be measured externally, for example, money, position, status, or ranking, you will continually have trouble remaining motivated to sell, especially when difficulties arise. That's because how you sell, or your action, is linked to why you sell, your motive, whether you know that right now or not. See, the breeding ground for hyping is created when you don't take the time to understand the primary reason for why you sell. But the proving ground for hyping is cultivated when you try to pull up your proverbial bootstraps by looking externally for inspiration instead of internally where your true motivating factors exist. I found this out early on in my sales career, the hard way. There I was again in the midst of another success seminar, along with thousands of people in the auditorium. I was standing on my feet, beating my chest and proclaiming, "I am great, I am a winner." The energy in the room was as intense as the speaker himself. He had literally put the audience in a trance that made us feel invincible. With a booming voice, he summoned us to dream big dreams. Again and again he shouted, "You can overcome anything." And I was truly believing it. I vividly remember the speaker as he towered over his audience and told his rags to riches story. It would have been difficult to convince anyone that he or she couldn't make something big happen. With 8 hours of pure exhilaration in my veins and several $100s worth of resources at my side, I felt, quote, programmed for success. I was invincible. But as I would soon find out, that wasn't enough. As the days passed, I felt my motivation waning. All the hype that external stimulation had summoned was beginning to dissolve, and reality was setting in. And after a few weeks, my success tape sought hibernation in the backseat of my car, and before much longer, I had only distant memories of the selling energy I had come to possess that day at the seminar. While I was contemplating this reality, I stumbled upon what is now the governing axiom in my life. I finally realized that motivation can't come from the outside. Let me say that again. Motivation can't come from the outside. It must begin on the inside if it is to be sustained consistently. Our company's average client spends approximately $5,000 each year on products and events in order to become a better, more enthusiastic salesperson. And of all the salespeople I speak to each year, nearly 1/3 of them have heard me speak before. These statistics indicate that salespeople want to be successful. They're not just spending money on products and seminars because it's fun. They're in it to win. They're looking for something to keep them on par with their colleagues, and they're looking for the key ingredient that will keep them enthusiastic about selling in good times and bad. The magic potion, if you will, that will keep them motivated to ascend and go beyond the hill of mediocrity. But many salespeople don't realize that the heart of remaining passionate about selling resides within them, not in the latest, greatest how-to merchandise. It's simple. When your core motives for selling are clear, your path to success is also clear, and there's no way around it. I'm a motivational speaker. It's what I do for a living. So it's obviously in my interest to motivate people, right? But in all my years of speaking professionally, I've learned one thing about the advice and enthusiasm my products and seminars offer. They're not the keys for remaining motivated to sell successfully. I can be the most motivational person in the world. I can play the loudest, most inspiring music at my events. I can show you the most touching movie film clips on 5 big screens that surround the room. I can have you walk on hot coals. I can fill your head with the most cutting-edge sales techniques and tactics. I can bring in the most successful salespeople on the planet to assure that you too can be successful and you too can have everything you want. But unless you understand your core motives for selling,